Hey guys, my name's Doug with Infotainment.com. Today we're working on the 2013 to 2018 Ram 1500 truck. This also includes the heavy duties as well. Today I'm going to talk to you guys about the factory backup camera. We've been carrying this kit for several years now. We've sold thousands of them with excellent results. If you want to add a backup camera to your truck, look no further. We carry these kits at Infotainment.com. This one in particular is great because it's all plug and play, easy to install, which we'll demonstrate, but it gives you that factory quality. You'll also get the dynamic grid line. So as you turn your steering wheel, the grid lines on the screen will move as well. Again, 100% plug and play. You're going to replace your tailgate handle. You're going to run your wiring through the chassis of the truck into the cab, behind your factory radio, and then you're going to program the truck using the OBD Genie programmer. You just simply plug this in your OBD port under your steering column. It'll program your vehicle's computer to accept it. Again, very easy. I'm going to demonstrate it now, so let's get started.
So some of the tools you're going to need for the job are a panel removal tool, a panel popper or a Christmas tree popper, a flush cuts, or some kind of snip to cut some zip ties. You'll need some zip ties to clean up the wires a little bit. A flathead screwdriver, a little mini one is all you really need, and or a panel popper, very helpful for pulling interior panels. Some caulking or strip caulk. Rubber type seal, silicone, even duct tape will work just to seal up the hole that we're going to make running into the cab. A 8mm socket, 7mm socket, T30 and T20 Torx bit, and something to drive all the said Torx bit and sockets. Now you want to go ahead and grab your T30 Torx. Remove the 8 T30 Torx screws that are holding on your tailgate's access panel. And these T30s have a plastic washer that kind of hang onto the screw here, but because this thing has a spray and bed liner, those are kind of stuck to the bed. Maybe some will come off as we're removing it. Those are actually there to protect the paint from getting marred up. So if you do not have a spray and bed liner, be aware of those little plastic washers. Make sure to keep those on the screws. And next, if you do have a spray and bed liner, these depending on your spray tech, actually these can sometimes be stuck here, so you might want to get a panel tool and pop this up if you need to. But we'll set this aside for now. And this is where we're going to be working primarily, inside the tailgate. Alright, so once you remove that panel, you'll get access to those 8mm bolts holding that handle on. It may make it easier to pop these little clips off and take off the rods that hold the latches or activate the latches on the end of the tailgate. It's just these little plastic clips here. You slide them to the side, the rod comes up. If you're removing these to make it easier for yourself, keep in mind, put these back on. If you close the tailgate with these off, the handle won't open it. So make sure to put those back if you're going to take them off. You remove 8mm nut on either side. And now it's going to be from underneath. So once you remove the 8mm, you're going to want to pull this handle out. It's a little weird because the handle's kind of bigger than the hole that you're pulling it out of. And I like to be aware of where the nuts and everything are so I can avoid scratching the paint. But I kind of just twist it in a downward motion and pull the whole thing out. Alright, now that you got your handle out, you're going to want to grab the supplied handle that comes with your Infotainment backup camera kit, and you're going to want to swap the lock over from one to the other. So basically 2 8mm bolts that hold that lock on. And it'll only go on one way, so you really can't screw that up. And position that on your new handle with the camera and screw it back on. If you're not familiar with power tools, I wouldn't recommend using a power tool on this, just because it's plastic. And if you don't stop it in time, you can destroy this handle. So preferably use a manual wrench or something to tighten that down. And the other side, where you have your camera, you have this wire attached. It'll come attached with your kit. You're going to want to remove this because it'll ease installation of the handle back into the tailgate. So with your flathead, it needs to be lifted up, and then you can pull that wire right out of there. And this is also notched on the inside, so when you're putting it back on, you line everything up with that notch so you don't screw up any of the pins inside the camera. All right, and then now it's back underneath. You want to grab your new handle and kind of same thing like before. Be mindful of all your pins and stuff. Let's see. There we go. Alright, so once you got your handle back in there, you're going to get the 2 8mm nuts and tighten those back on. So once that handle is securely in place, we can reconnect the plug here and make sure to line up those little, there you go, line up those little notches and make sure it clips into place, give it a little tug, and that's nice and secure. And we're going to route that in the same direction that these factory wires are ran into. And we're going to take the supplied harness, extension harness that comes with this camera to run into your cab. We're going to take the side that fits, it'll only go on one way, and we'll plug that all into the camera here. And then once that's routed nice and clean along the factory wires, grab our zip ties. We want to secure those so they don't move around. Alright, and now we can reconnect these little latch rods here to the back of your handle. And before we put that access panel back on, we'll just verify function, handle works. As far as this wire down here, this will actually run along your factory wires. We'll throw another zip tie on here. This will run across along with your factory wires going down through the tailgate. If you follow these wires down and through the tailgate here, you'll see where they pop out of, and there's actually a tension rod inside your tailgate. And it doesn't really matter if you put it on the top or on the bottom, but I usually like to follow the factory wires because you know wherever they put their wires, it's not going to get pinched or snagged on anything. So I went underneath that tension rod just like the factory wires, and there's actually an access hole in the bed, perfect, so you can just drop it right in there. Alright, so from underneath the truck, you can see where that access hole is and where we ran it. Just along the factory harness here. Zip tied and up and over this support beam right here for the bed. And essentially just following this factory harness all the way to the front. That's where you're going to want to grab your zip ties and zip tie it up nice and tight against that factory harness. So biggest things are avoiding moving parts, suspension parts, any type of exhaust part, Although we are working on the driver's side of this vehicle and there is no exhaust. Some of you guys might have a dual exhaust system. Be mindful of where you're placing that wire. Alright, so now that you have everything nice and secure in here, you want to grab your access panel, put it back the way it was, line up all of the 8 holes, and drop your T30 Torx back in there. And what I like to do is kind of get them started before I actually tighten one down, just because it'll help you not bind up any of the holes. Keep all your threads nice and straight. Alright, now we can run the wires to the front of the vehicle. Alright, from inside the frame rail towards the front, you can see where that factory wiring harness is. We ran it right across that factory wiring harness right above the fuel lines here. Got a zip tie. Do the famous one-handed zip tie. Alright, and come down across the frame, and from here you'll want to jump right over the frame to the outside of the vehicle. Alright, from here you're going to have a little plastic plug here. The easiest way to remove this is just by giving it a good smack until it pops up underneath your carpet here. So where the clip is underneath it, you're going to want to remove that little plug. It's kind of right towards the rear of that front driver's door. It's kind of right underneath the driver's seat here. So what you're going to want to do is get either a panel popper or just grab this door sill molding with your fingers, pop that up, and when you get to the front here, you can kind of just put it towards the rear, and that'll remove all the clips. This thing will come right out. And from underneath the seat here, you're going to want to lift up that carpet, and you can grab that plug that we pulled out earlier. Now there's probably going to be some sound deadening material or some on here. That stuff you can just kind of pick it off and peel it away. You don't really need that once you pull this out. As you can see, we cut a little square out of this piece. This is where we're going to be running our wires from the bottom into the cab of the vehicle. This is also what you're going to need your seal for. So once you get those wires through, you can seal up this hole, prevent any moisture from coming up into the cab. So now that you got your wires ran up to underneath the driver's door here, what I like to do to help fish wires if I don't have something to kind of run the wire with is if you just take that wire and you just kind of fold it and you give it a little loop, it'll be a little bit rigid, so you can kind of fish it up by yourself one-handed. And it also gives you somewhere so you can stick your finger through and help you pull that wire up and into wherever you're trying to get it to. And be careful with the end of the connectors. Make sure to be gentle with it. You don't want to rip any of these off. Now that it's into the vehicle, we can take it, run those wires through that little grommet you removed, and this will just pop right back into place into that hole you removed. And because you're not going to really be able to see me putting the seal on because it's going to be underneath this carpet here, once you have this back in place, you can just take your seal and cover it up. Duct tape also is commonly used. Silicone you can use, but just keep in mind it's going to be messy. You're probably going to want to do the silicone from the bottom as opposed to the top. Lift this up and slide this back into place. Make sure you pull the slack from the wires, and then we can seal up the rest of that exposed hole there with our sealant. Alright, so now that you got that hole all sealed up, you're going to want to run your wire to the front. Keep in mind there's some holes in the door sill here, or in the body here, for those clips on the panel here, so you don't want to get the wire anywhere near those holes, because when you go to put your clips back in, when you put your panel on, you're going to pinch or cut that wire that you're running. We'll run it down. Make sure to put the carpet back so nobody knows we were in here. Alright, so once you get on the inside of the kick panel here, this is not necessary, but I like to remove this little Christmas tree here so I can run this wire up into here and then clip this back on. And once you have that through there, there's actually, let me depress the brake pedal, get more room. There's actually a cable that pulls that e-brake or releases that e-brake. I go up and above that cable. Because again, you don't want to bind anything up or have anything be pinching on your wires. So I run it up above there, and you'll find some wires, some factory wires underneath your dash here. I like to zip tie that wire onto those wiring harnesses, kind of keep it up and out of the way, make sure it doesn't fall on your feet while you're driving. That would be very bad. Again, you have another cable for that hood latch. I go up and above that cable. Alright, but yeah, once you get this ran across the under side of your dash, you can get into that radio removal. Alright, so since our camera system came with the optional grid lines, we are going to take that blue wire that we connected to the BCM and run that along the same path that we took to run the video feed wires coming from that camera. Make sure to zip tie those up as well. Alright, now we can move up to the radio. Alright, now to remove this factory radio, on the top of the radio bezel here you got a little compartment. You got a little rubber mat, or this little rubber pad in there that just pops right up. You grab your flathead, remove that, and underneath that you're going to expose two T20 Torx. Let's pull those out, one on either side, and set those aside. Some of these trucks have a Torx in this little pocket here. On this model it does not, so essentially you just pop that whole panel right off. You can unplug it to give yourself a little bit more room to work. There we go. Set that aside. Now from in here, to pull this radio out, you have 4 7mm screws. Pull those out, and your radio is now free. From the back here, you'll see all the various plugs plugged into the radio. It's not necessary to remove the radio, but to give you guys a little bit better view, I'm going to pull the whole radio completely out of there and set it aside, because we will be connecting a T-harness that is supplied with your camera kit from Infotainment.com. That'll plug right in and clip in just like your radio did. And what this is doing is it's giving you an input for that rear view camera. Now when you get your kit, these will be all connected. You just need to get either a razor blade or your flush cuts and kind of break this little plastic sheathing that's around this RCA so you can remove it. This side's not going to be used. You're just going to be using the input that is going to your factory radio. All of these extra plugs are for other options that we're not going to be using at this time. What you can do is zip tie all of these off to the side after you run your other wires up to this plug here. And to get the other wires up into your radio compartment, just like earlier, you can get this video feed line from your camera and give it a little bend, straighten it out so you can feed it up through your dash. Alright, so once you run those wires up into the radio compartment, you have your connectors here, that one coming from the BCM and that other line that came from your camera feed and power wire. You'll just connect those together like so. And this way you have your one line here that's coming from the camera and giving the camera those moving grid lines. And now we'll need to access the switched power from your cigarette lighter here. You got two cigarette lighters, but the one on the driver's side is switch power. It's actually powered when you turn the key on. The other side is always powered, so you don't want it to be on that side. You want it to turn on when the key is activated. So there's not a lot of room behind here to unplug that plug connected there. So you can optionally remove a couple of screws and kind of pop this panel outwards to give yourself more access. What I like to do is just stick my finger behind it, and usually you can just kind of wiggle and push that cigarette lighter right out of the socket. Once it's out of the socket, you'll be able to just get enough length on it to unplug that cigarette lighter plug. And we'll grab the cigarette lighter T-harness that comes with our camera kit, and you can plug that into the cigarette lighter line that you just removed from the back of the cigarette lighter, and plug the other end into your cigarette lighter. And now you'll have a power feed for your rear view camera. Feed those back up into the radio compartment, and make sure you put this back in, if you did remove it, in the same orientation that you removed it from, so it still works like it did. And with that power feed, you can now give your camera some power. Plug that into your camera harness that you ran from the rear of the vehicle. And now we are left with the video signal that is going to be plugged into the back of the radio, or the harness that we just plugged in the back of the radio. So and plug that in. And it might be a good idea to either zip tie this to this harness or put some tape on it, just so nothing goes anywhere or moves around on you. So I'm going to put a zip tie on it, and that way that RCA won't accidentally unplug itself. Alright, now you can put the radio back in. Same kind of little swing arm that locks it in place, just like on the BCM. And once it locks in place, just give it a nice little tug, make sure it's not going anywhere, and you can plug all your other antennas back in. Okay, line our radio back up. Put our screws back in and get our dash put back together. Alright, the line's running up to the radio. You can also throw a zip tie around here if you want. More of personal preference. I kind of don't like wires hanging myself, so I'm going to throw a zip tie around there, just kind of keep everything bundled up. We'll stow that to the side there and plug our bezel back in. Alright, now that we got the climate controls and our bezel back together, we can snap it back in place and throw our two T20 Torx back in on top. And put the little rubber pad back on. Alright, now we can finish it up. And to finish everything up here with the wire running, we can go ahead and put our kick panel back in. I like to pull this seal out a little bit because this kick panel actually resides behind the seal. So you put this front portion in, clip that in, and you can press that door trim seal right back on. Make sure your floor mat's not in the way, and clip it down the rest of the way. Alright, so after your camera and radio and everything is installed and back together, you still need to program the vehicle to recognize the camera is installed. And included in your kit is an OBD Genie. Super straightforward. It's got a little sticker covering the port. Just pull that sticker back, plug this into your OBD2 port. Alright, so after you program the vehicle with the OBD Genie, you turn off the ignition, let the vehicle rest for a little while, maybe 30 seconds. Then you're going to want to start it up and put it in reverse and see if the camera works. And there you go. You got your backup camera with steering control grid lines. Alright, and that concludes our install of our backup camera on our 2016 Ram truck here. For more upgrades like this, check us out at Infotainment.com. I'm Mr. Chris with Infotainment.com, signing out.